But what I think is most interesting is looking back, how she's just like an index. She's just a good mirror for the state of the debate of the fight for women's rights.
There were two characters in comic book publication that radically changed depending on the politics of the time. It was Wonder Woman and Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane. Both those characters were created right at the beginning of World War II. Men were going off to war, women were becoming more active in the workplace because they had to. And these two characters embodied sort of a Rosie the Riveter kind of we can do anything spirit. And then the 50s, of course, was a more conservative time in America. There was a real move from the government to get women back into the homes, and comics reflected that time. And certainly the rise of communism panicked people in entertainment, panicked publishers, and comics became a very conservative medium. That absolutely reflected in the pages of Wonder Woman, where you once had this incredibly progressive, very physical character suddenly reduced to a woman who was the romance editor of a magazine, was basically there to rebuff Steve Trevor and who always wanted to marry her, but still at the end of the day was not at all as progressive as she had been. The 60s, of course, a lot of science fiction, a lot of crazy pop science fiction, fighting off toxic monsters from space. Crazy, but certainly a reflection of the larger pop culture. Wonder Woman had her famous 70s jumpsuit period where she was powerless.
And one could look at that in a positive light, you know, oh, well, she's just keeping up with the times. But the storyline started to change, and so Gloria Steinem led a team of women to rally to get Wonder Woman's powers back. And I think that was really significant because in the book that Gloria Steinem published, I believe it was 1972, it was a special Ms. magazine celebrating Wonder Woman, she starts to talk about how significant Wonder Woman had been to her as a young girl. She also talks about, and I think this is why Wonder Woman is such an interesting character. She writes in this book how just incredibly relevant Wonder Woman was to her in terms of forming her own ideologies as a feminist.
The means by which women who are engaged in these political activities or, you know, trying to reform healthcare for women, whatever campaign it is that they're fighting for, that Wonder Woman would be inspiring to them as the vessel for making those claims, that's really interesting. Like, that is a way that the character can be transformed.
Ultimately, the 80s is when Wonder Woman changed, and I really believe that the current version of Wonder Woman we have is a direct result of the George Perez reboot of that character in 1985. She was an adventurer who could stand toe-to-toe with Superman, had adventures on the scale of Odysseus and Theseus, and yet still promoted a message of peace. Love was still her biggest motivating factor. In the 90s, of course, Wonder Woman changed, again, reflecting the times. Bad girls were big, particularly in comics. She had a very popular, incredibly well-selling period where she gave up her costume. The artwork was incredibly dynamic by an artist named Mike Deodato. Suddenly became this warrior princess, and fans applauded. The current marketplace really loves this notion of the Spartan Wonder Woman, the warrior Wonder Woman, who has a battle cry and a sword and shield. The other interesting transformation, of course, is her backstory, her world.
Her original origin was she was created from clay by her mother because her mother wanted a baby, and the gods breathed life into the baby. But she's supposed to be part of a trinity: Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. There's a human and an alien. Where's our god? We just need a god. So now, in current continuity, she's the daughter of Zeus, because the Greek gods, they're good and bad, and 100 different shades of gray, and they get jealous and they get angry. That's what makes them so interesting to watch and so interesting to write, really.
We wanted Wonder Woman to be a little bit more vulnerable, to take her away from this perfect goddess character, because that's really not interesting. It doesn't give you any room to grow, and it doesn't give you any possibilities for story. You need a character to make mistakes.
I really reject the idea that because there are so few women in comics, every woman who is in comics has to be Miss Perfect, empowering, never cries. It's how dull. Like, I don't think it's about creating good role models. I think it's about writing women as humans.
But she's very much a character that's put in situations where she had to use everything at her disposal, not just her lasso of truth and not just her bullet-deflecting bracelets. She had to use all her wiles to get out of situations or fix things or save people. So you see that in her, and I think it's inspirational.